Hi, everyone. Welcome to the virtual forum for the Puerto Rico earthquakes. We are going to go ahead and get started now. And if you have joined, please go ahead and mute your phone line or computer audio to cut down on background noise. And thank you so much for that. My name is Lori Peak, and I'm the principal investigator for the National Science Foundation supported Social Science Extreme Events Research, or SSEER network, headquartered at the Converge facility here at the Natural Hazards Center. Sorry. The mission of SSEER is to identify, map, and connect social scientists to one another, to interdisciplinary teams, and to communities at risk to and affected by hazards and disasters, and also to amplify and advance social science extreme events research through providing training and mentoring, setting new scientific agendas, and supporting virtual as well as field research efforts. And to date, we have had nearly 1,000 social scientists across the US, as well as globally, who have signed up for the SSEER network. And so thank you to the SSEER network members and to all of you who have joined this virtual forum today. Today's virtual forum will focus on the social impacts and public health consequences of recent earthquake activity in Puerto Rico, especially as connected to these recent events, as well as the continuing recovery efforts from hurricanes and other damaging events that have affected the island. Before proceeding, I wanted to pause to acknowledge the people of Puerto Rico and the ongoing impacts of these various events. We will have an opportunity today to hear from some of our colleagues from Puerto Rico, as well as other SSEER researchers with ongoing projects in the region. We have dozens of people who have signed up for this forum today. So I just want to say a few words about purpose and process before we begin. So the purpose of today's virtual forum is really fourfold. So first is to learn from SSEER researchers on the ground, as well as those with ongoing projects in Puerto Rico. Second, to begin a discussion of ethical considerations and possibilities for research coordination. Third, to identify pressing research questions, as well as possible needs for perishable data collection, as well as baseline data collection on the social impacts of the event. And fourth, to establish whether there is a need for additional social science research support, and to identify who may wish to join an SSEER field team should one go to Puerto Rico. Given the number of people on this call, we're going to organize as follows. So we're going to loosely follow the what I sort of call the roll call model that oftentimes federal agencies, as well as the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute and other groups oftentimes use for post-event disaster briefings. And so we're going to begin today by inviting locally affected SSEER researchers in Puerto Rico, SSEER researchers who were in Puerto Rico at the time of earthquakes, to provide brief updates to the network. Then we will hear from social scientists who are on the ground in Puerto Rico now. Next, we will invite those who are leading Puerto Rico focused coordination networks to provide a brief update. Then we will invite SSEER researchers with ongoing projects in Puerto Rico focused on Hurricane Maria or other events to share where they're out in the project and any information they want to get out to the network. And then any remaining time we have today, we'll dedicate to questions, comments, resource sharing, and information sharing among those on the forum. So Katie Murphy, who is here with me at the Natural Hazards Center, is taking detailed notes, which we will post on the virtual forum page for the Puerto Rico earthquakes, along with the recording of this virtual forum. And we invite everyone on this call to please use the chat function in the Zoom webinar platform to share information, questions, and so forth. And we will also make sure that that is posted on the page. So as noted, we're going to begin now by hearing brief 1 to 2 minute updates from local researchers in Puerto Rico. And
excuse me,
I already have
difficult. It's very difficult. It's very choppy. I don't know what's happening with your microphone, so I'm sorry that yes.
Oh, sorry, Krista. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I will try to move it a little closer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to invite locally affected SSEER researchers to provide a brief 1 to 2 minute update to the broader network. And I have the names of 3 SSEER researchers who I'm going to invite to share right now, who I heard from in advance of this virtual forum. And then if you are a locally affected SSEER researcher in Puerto Rico, if you could put your name in the chat box and we will call on you once we've heard from the other researchers. So Jennifer Santos Hernandez, if you could please lead us off with providing a briefing and access to some of the resources that I know you have been generating. And a reminder, if you're on the call, if you are not speaking, if you could please mute your microphone, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. And Jennifer, over to you.
Hi, Lori, and hi, everyone else. My name is Jennifer Santos. I'm a research professor in sociology of disasters at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. As everyone else, we were affected by the events in the sense that we felt them, but certainly didn't have any personal impact. Pretty much what we've been doing is doing quick response research, kind of get a sense of pretty much the organization of services for evacuees, the situation at the shelters, and pretty much understanding protective actions after the event. So that's mostly what we're focusing on. We've shared some updates of the situation at the shelters. We just came back from down there, pretty much all the ones that have base camps. The number of evacuees have increased, with the exception of the one in Guanica. They had close to 600 evacuees on Monday, and they have about 200 today. So there's been a drastic change. And you know, when you ask around what's going on, a lot of people explain that they're going with relatives, moving with relatives to the mainland, or that they decided to leave the shelter. Some other of the folks that are staying outside say that they feel safer outside, in the sense that there was a lot of people inside the shelter, and some kids were starting to get flu-type symptoms, so there was a concern for health, but the rest of them are pretty stable. Services are improving dramatically in the sense of having access to showers, bathrooms, food, clothes, and everything. Most residents don't understand what a presidential declaration of disaster means. Many of them were not even aware that a presidential declaration of disaster was signed yesterday. So it's that remains as a challenge, because many people are leaving this shelter, so they might not even know that this assistance is available to them. So that's a major concern. In terms of supply and logistics, the usual needs, a mismatch between donations and needs, and also spatial differences in the distribution and availability of those resources. And in terms of damage, we visit several of the areas that residents identify as the ones that were the most hit and most affected, and the damage, you know, is disconcerting. Houses completely destroyed, communities that are pretty much empty, And I think that that's the case, particularly of Wanaka. It's pretty much a ghost town. So we're pretty much, that's what we're doing, and we're organizing our ideas and our observations through this updates and pulling together a broader effort to look at protective actions and decision making in a more systematic way.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I really wanted to acknowledge those updates that you just mentioned at the end. We have posted the 2 updates that you and your team have already written. They are up on the virtual forum page for on the Converge website. And so thank you so much for compiling those. And to everybody on the call, you can access them via the virtual forum page at converge.colorado.edu. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Adriana Lopez, are you on the call, and would you go next, please? I think Adriana was going to. Oh, Adriana, I can see you on the, can you go ahead next, please?
I'm gonna actually pass on this one. I'm not gonna have a good connection, so I'm just gonna let somebody else talk for now. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Is Alexa Dietrich on the call, who I know was also an SSEER researcher who was in Puerto Rico at the time of the events?
Yeah, I'm here, and I don't really want to say very much because I think there may be some additional folks, I don't know if they contacted you or not, who are on the ground still, and I'm not. I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that is really important is that as researchers, especially if there are researchers who are not connected very strongly to Puerto Rico, and even some of us maybe who have been in the past, that we think very carefully about evaluating what and when research is needed. Is research what is needed? And then if the answer to that question is yes, which may be the case in some cases, examples that Jennifer gave, for example, of applied research is important, but also if research is to be done, are you the appropriate person to be doing that research? And I think that there are some circumstances that many of us are familiar with, both in the past and in current research, where that might not be the case. So I would encourage everybody who's thinking about rushing in and doing research. I've had a couple colleagues who I've heard from who are Puerto Rican, who have expressed concern that everybody's getting ready to write their rapid grants without thinking very much about what the impact for people really is. So I just wanted to put that out there for folks who are thinking about doing research, and now I'll let other folks talk.
Thank you, Alexa. Are there any other researchers from Puerto Rico who are on the telephone who have an update to share?
I'm Heidi Figueroa. I'm from Puerto Rico, but I'm not doing any research on disaster as such. So I was invited here because I'm interested in telecommunications crisis in the context of the Hurricane Maria. And actually, I am trying to support students' mobilizations to Peñuelas and Laja, for example, to give some kind of assistance to the refugees. But, you know, I'm not conducting research as such. I'm just, you know, coordinating things from San Juan and doing some side visit.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you for joining and for the work that you are doing. We've had a couple of requests for names of researchers who are doing work in the area, have been doing work in the area, but also persons like yourself who are assisting others. And so we will definitely circle back and include this in the notes after the forum. So thank you so much. And thanks to those using the chat box. I see that Krista put a question up there, and we will wrap back to these momentarily. So thank you. So Next, we're going to check in and see. I know there have been a couple of social scientists who, after the earthquake sequence began, actually have moved to Puerto Rico. And so now we're going to move into the portion of the forum. If you're a social scientist who is in Puerto Rico right now and you have an update or briefing to share with the broader network. And so is Sarah McBride on the line, who I know is one of the social scientists who recently went to Puerto Rico.
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Sarah McBride with the fantastic Lindsay Davis here as well. Lindsay will be known to everybody at the Natural Hazard Center until the USGS poached her a couple of months ago. Lindsay has been working as the earthquake liaison here in Puerto Rico since pretty close since the M6.4. She was here the day after to work with the USGS, the US Geological Survey, and I'm here in the capacity of Chief Operations Officer for the USGS Scientific Response. I'm also a social scientist. I'm just here to give you a quick brief on what is occurring from the geological side, as well as answering any questions in terms of any kind of federal response or any discussions around that in terms of the US Geological Survey. So we have had, since the M6.4 on January 7th, we have had over 280 magnitude 3 or above earthquakes. And the key thing about this is, even though that seems quite small magnitude, these are very shallow earthquakes. They're, you know, between 3 to 8 miles deep at this point. And so even a magnitude 3 that is really close to people and that shallow, people can feel. So this is part of one of the complexities that we're noting here, is that so many people are feeling these earthquakes. So I just want people to be aware of that. In terms of response, we have really encouraged FEMA to include mental health information because we, having worked in this environment, Lindsay and myself, for quite some time, we understand that mental health is one of the critical components with PTSD-like symptoms for people exposed to large damaging earthquakes, and particularly long aftershock sequences and durations. And with these shallow crustal earthquakes, and because people are feeling these so frequently. So Lori, is there anything else that you wanted me to cover in particular?
I think that's very helpful, and thank you so much, Sarah. And I think just if there's anything else you and Lindsay want to add in terms of if you're seeing anything in terms of social impacts, health consequences that the SSEER researchers might need to be aware of, especially as related to the geologic impacts as you're noting.
Just quickly, we just wanted to say that we're getting various reports of how many evacuees or survivors are in base camps. It's between 7,500 to 8,000 at this point, but we can't really confirm that number. That number fluctuates, and it's highly sensitive. We do know that a fair percentage of these evacuees are children or elderly or people with access and functional needs. So anyone going into these areas, we would ask, well, we can't ask, but we want people to take into account the vulnerable populations that are impacted by these events.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay, was there anything you wanted to add? I know you've been doing many briefings in Puerto Rico. Was there anything from you?
I had anything I wanted to add. Just thanks so much for organizing this, Lori, and for everyone who's on the call. We've been working really closely, and Krista is actually a great resource. I noticed that she sent a message in the text box, so I would really encourage people to reach out to her in response to that. And if the Red Seismica has anything, Krista could probably speak to that also.
And for those on the call, Red Seismica is the Puerto Rico Seismic Network, because we do have local seismologists here on the island as well. And if anyone has any questions about social science and Puerto Rico and the USGS, please feel free to reach out to myself or Lindsay as well.
Thank you. And for those of you who've telephoned in and aren't able to see via the Zoom application, we will download the information that's coming through the Zoom group chat so that people can see the names and contact information and the information that's being shared via that function. So thank you, Lindsay and Sarah, very much for the work you're doing in Puerto Rico. And I wanted to see if Kyle, who is also in Puerto Rico and just put something in the chat box, Kyle, would you like to give a 1 to 2 minute update on interests and your work there in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, hi, sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Yeah, I'll just briefly say, so I'm at the School of Pharmacy here at the University of Puerto Rico, and I'm interested in how community pharmacies in particular are able to kind of support the immediate health needs of communities after a natural disaster, given their kind of very broad geographic distribution, decentralized kind of model of providing healthcare. And so we looked at that a little bit after Hurricane Maria, and that's just kind of an ongoing interest of mine.
Thank you, Kyle. Are there any other social scientists on the ground in Puerto Rico who want to share before we move on with the brief updates?
Hi, everyone. This is Adriana Garriga Lopez. It's a bit noisy here, but I will just try to say a couple of things. As to vulnerable populations, I think the one most in evidence has been elderly folks. It's been clear that there are there's a deep lack of medical services, especially for elderly people, and we've seen the consequences of that in terms of the people that have passed away as a result of the earthquakes have been mostly elderly folks. So I think that that's a clear area of research there. Another group that has been affected and people are organizing at the community level in response to the earthquake crisis has been LGBTQ plus folks. I've been connected to some local activists that have been doing work in that regard. And then the other need that has been very clearly expressed by people affected through community and activist networks has been the need for psychological support for both adults and children. And those are things that just on the observational level, you know, through my networks and my participation here on the ground, those are very clear needs. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana, so much for the additional context. Now I'm going to ask if Marla Perez Lugo and Fernando Rivera are both on the line. We're next going to hear updates from leaders of Puerto Rico focus coordination networks. And so I know that Marla and Fernando fall into that category, but if you are helping to coordinate researchers or other needs in response to the earthquakes, if you could put your name in the chat box and I'll call on you next. But Marla, could you take a couple of minutes and brief everyone on the call about the RISE network and some other thoughts you've had about emerging research needs? Thank you, Marla.
Thank you so much. My name is Marla Perez Lugo, and I am an environmental sociologist, a professor at the Department of Social Sciences at UPR Mayagüez. But I am right now in Penn State, organizing with the National Council for Science and the Environment and many other partner institutions, what we call the RISE network. The RISE network started or was born out of our experience as local researchers and local scientists in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. And we could observe several things. First of all, the dismissive attitude of the local government towards local expertise and knowledge. And we all know that if you dismiss local expertise, you automatically, make the recovery and reconstruction process longer and less effective. So that's what happened with the local expertise and local scientists. Also, we could see the lack of coordination among universities' efforts. Universities have become, in my opinion, first responders. They go to the disaster site, they intervene with communities, they do research with human subjects that are highly traumatized, as it was mentioned before. But we also send students for service learning activities, and we provide humanitarian aid. So all that without being actually organized to do that. So what we could see after Maria was the lack of coordination among these many efforts. And that motivated us to start thinking about what is the role of universities in general in disasters, and how could we re-envision that role, changing the paradigm so universities perceive themselves as actors in the disaster landscape and not just as mere observers. So our inaugural event was in November in University of Albany, the SUNY system, and about 500 people representing 114 universities attended and participated, not only as speakers, but also as active discussants and participants in workshop type of activities, precisely to be able to design a new role for universities in disasters. We had a research cohort, a researchers cohort, a student cohort, university leadership cohort, agencies cohort. So we are in the process of analyzing all that data now to be able to create this new framework for universities' interventions in disasters. So right after the earthquakes, we could mobilize several initiatives through the network. For example, we are organizing the brigade from New York of structural engineers that are going to be tagging buildings and other structures. And that for social scientists is very important, because perception of risk is really high, and there's such a lack of trust in the state government that having a third-party certification of the structures, I think, will go a long way in providing certain relief and certain feeling of safety or certainty in the capacity of their homes to withstand a future shock. We are also organizing a group from New Paltz, from the Center on Mental Health in Disasters, and we are going to be holding a series of workshops addressed to everybody, from psychologists, counselors, nurses, any person that works in the service area or wants to provide service, on how to deal with mental health issues and provide some basic support, not only to community members, but also to emergency managers and journalists. The need to address journalists was very highlighted at the RISE conference, because they are the forgotten stakeholder, basically. And we had a journalist that was saying, I had to deal with my losses and the losses of everyone else, and my boss doesn't care. They just want the article to be published. So for social scientists, I think the lack of trust in the state government is very necessary to address that. You know, the whole emergency management apparatus is based on the assumption of a strong state government. And the federal government is organized just to provide support to the state government. But what happens when you have a weak state government and complete lack of trust of the citizenry towards that government? So we will have to change the way in which the federal government interact with the state government and with communities that are being affected by the disaster. So one thing that is very worrisome because of these coordination efforts, I have been in many phone calls with FEMA and other actors, and they are, the governmental organizations are not addressing really the spontaneous shelters and the spontaneous refugee camps that are forming. In fact, they were telling NGOs to tell people that if they don't go to the tent or the formal refugee camp, that they will not be able to provide them with service. So I think that is a little bit worrisome. They are asking the communities to adapt to the regulations instead of adapting the regulations to responding to the situation. You know, just to finish, right? I don't want to take the whole phone call. There's a strong need for legitimizing local knowledge. In this particular situation, there are several individuals from UPR Mayagüez that have been in the news, and they have been highlighted as you know, as advocates for the citizenry well-being, and they have forced the local government to address issues that they didn't want to afford. For example, the certification of the school structures. The Association of Engineers and these faculty members were the one who pressed the local government to actually make walkthrough inspections and the certification of these structures before starting the semester again. So colleagues from the outside can do a lot in legitimizing local knowledge and supporting local scientists and researchers in their quest for legitimacy in front of the local government. Also, researchers from the outside can help establishing fair relationships. You know, understanding that yes, your research is really important, but the people who you need to collaborate with you are victims as well, or survivors as well. So they have their own set of needs. So recognizing that fact and recognizing the value of their contributions, even though it's not writing half of the paper, for example, or writing parts of the proposal, I think it will go a long way. And of course, the ethics of research, it has been mentioned here that research, extreme operating environments are very particular situations in which the protocols for this research with human subjects may not apply as they are designed. You know, as it today, IRB protocols do not identify disaster communities or disaster survivors as vulnerable population. So we need to be careful when we design this type of intervention because we could be violating the right of potential participants for consent. And I saw it happening after Hurricane Maria, when groups of researchers were embedding in FEMA combo, and they just started asking questions, and the people who were responding to these questions didn't know that they were just doing research and that their answers were not tied in any way to the possibilities of getting aid or immediate assistance. So those are the points that I wanted to make. And in terms of research, maybe we can research ourselves. I propose that we actually conduct research with researchers from the outside in the disaster environment to measure attitudes, beliefs, values, how they interact with local actors, to be able to design effective interventions with potential disaster researchers in the future.
Marla, thank you so much, and thank you for all of the work that you, Cecilio, and the entire RISE network have been doing, and thank you very much for that, both the briefing, the research coordination and practice coordination through RISE, and for the comments. Thank you very much.
If I can make one last comment.
Yeah.
There's going to be a wave of students that are going to be transferring to U.S. mainland institutions. After Maria, universities received thousands of applications of displaced students. We just published a set of guidelines for making that transition less painful for the students who are transferring. And the authors of those guidelines are students, displaced students themselves that are now at ASU. Fernando Rivera, who is on the call, participated in the design of those guidelines. The Dean of Arts and Sciences from SUNY Albany. So, and Glorinel Ojeda, that is on the phone call, also participated. So please distribute it widely so our institutions are aware of the vulnerabilities of this group that are basically refugees. So we should be treating them as such.
Marla, thank you so much. And if you would be willing to send that to me via email, we'll put that up on the virtual forum page with the resources that Jennifer shared previously. And this is just a pause to call to everyone on the virtual forum. If you have similar resources like that you would like to get out to the network, we will post that. So thank you, Marla. And Fernando Rivera, who is the leader of the Puerto Rico Research Hub, could you please go next? And then Santos Cardona, I see your name in the chat box too, so I'll call on you next. And just checking in, we have about 23 minutes to go in the forum, and thank you to everybody for this information you're sharing. So Fernando, over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lori, for putting this together. I'm in the position where I'm on the other side of the equation, where I'm in the state with the largest population of Puerto Ricans, and in Central Florida, where there's the largest concentration. So I'm in the position as a researcher that I get to inform the public out here. One of the biggest concern that I'm getting from the media is whether this is going to lead to a massive population movement in Central Florida. And such is a need for research in that area as well, because a lot of people, with all the things that have been discussed here in the call, are looking at Florida as another place of recovery from this situation. And this is a unique situation because there's a need from Hurricane Maria, especially with trauma. And now they're dealing with a new type of hazard that is, people are not accustomed in Puerto Rico to react to it. And we saw that in the first sort of reaction of people just reacting to it as if it was a hurricane. So I'm in that position out here that also, if you're thinking about providing resources and all those type of things, eventually they're gonna come to Central Florida, and there's gonna be a need for doing that research, not necessarily in Puerto Rico, but also for a large segment of the population as well. I can tell you that a lot of people with Puerto Rican families here are feeling also the impact of the storm, of the earthquakes as they're happening right now. So those are some important indications out here. I think, for me, when this all started to happen and was getting the media requests, I did immediately did touch base with the RISE folks, and some of the information that was related to me, I related to the media. And I think as we move forward, we need to have a better coordination of the efforts that are going on, because I've seen a lot of people saying different things, and there's a lot of confusion out there. And sometimes people like me in that position, and probably a lot of you in your positions that you hold, you're sort of the icon of information, And the more we can have in terms of, the information that we can provide, the better. I'm helping out in all the capacity that I can in terms of looking at how I can help here. Because I've seen sort of this organization in terms of getting the aid and all sort of thing. Again, basic instinct. A lot of people start collecting water and all those type of things when that's not necessarily what we need in this instance out here. So there has to be a better way to communicate the needs out here. But I will suggest everybody to look at the RISE Network Facebook page. I'm posting sort of locally also some of the things from the Puerto Rico Research Hub Facebook page as well. So that's some of the things also that, eventually we need to have a better communication system that we can be on top of it and lessen a little bit of the panic that is happening right now. And for all of us as social scientists, this is happening in a context of a highly contested election. And I'm in a state where this has become political. So we have to be aware of the intentions that people might have when they approach us as well. And politics here are a little bit different from politics in Puerto Rico out here, but that's kind of like a very, I would say, dangerous combination as we move forward in some of the things that are going on. So I'll keep it there, but thank you everybody for being on the call, and let's continue to work together.
Thank you, Fernando.
Lori?
Oh, yes.
Can I say a few things?
Yes, of course.
This is Jennifer. Yeah, I kept my remarks under the 1-2 minute time limit. So I want to emphasize a few things in terms of the situation here. The situation, obviously, everyone is concerned, and there's a great deal of anxiety, particularly among elders, those with pre-existing mental health conditions. But this is a localized event for the most part. There's definitely widespread stress and anxiety given the forecast by the USGS. Regardless how close, how far you are, there's even there are ongoing conversations in terms of concern and the implications of an earthquake here in the Virgin Islands. So it's an issue that it's not just in the southern region of Puerto Rico, but in the broader Caribbean region. It's a concern because there's a concern for a tsunami in this smaller island. But I want to emphasize that the crisis situation is in the municipalities in the southern region of Puerto Rico. In San Juan, the situation has pretty much normalized. There's definitely seismic activity and you feel it here and there, but it's very different from the southern region of Puerto Rico. The other thing that I want to emphasize, and listening to Fernando talking about how to organize aid, the rest of the island has really turned their hearts to these folks. It's very heartbreaking to see so many people who lost their home. So we are very we have a culture that is very warm and very oriented towards caring to others. So that is certainly the case. So there's no need for aid in terms of water, clothing, that kind of supplies. It's really, what we've seen is that there's waves of this aid coming in, but there's a constant supply. It does become an issue for shelters after the weekends because it's too much. And for example, all the clothing that was taken over the weekend that stayed outside had to be thrown out because it rained on Tuesday. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that, if you're really thinking about ways to help the island, overall the concern is really the safety of the house structures. A lot of people are concerned about whether the house is safe, and there's no pretty much there's no services or information provided by the government on how to do that. So there's a lot of pretty much not knowing what to do if you see a crack in your house, who you call, how you get that checked, how you contact a structural engineer. So there's definitely that. And the last thing that, you know, I want to emphasize is that there's certainly a need to look back at the research on the role of the military and the impact that it has on shelters. There was some of that work done after Hurricane Katrina. And I think that there should be a strong discussion on this because, you know, these are folks that lost their home, and your home is pretty much your safe space. And I understand the issue of security, but you don't have an M16 on your dining table. So it's, you know, right now we're only seeing it in one shelter, and we're going to inquire why is that. That was the first shelter that we visited today. We were there at like 6:30 in the morning because we wanted to see the startup and the breakfast and pretty much the registration process. But that was the only shelter where we saw military presence, and it's actually the only shelter that has lost so many folks registered in a matter of 4 days. So that's a concern. That's a major concern. And again, you know, if I can do anything to help anyone or if they have any questions that I may answer, you can, you know, I'm going to write my email on the chat, and I'll be very happy to answer. I might be a little bit slow if I'm not here, but yeah, I'll certainly answer. And last but not least, one of the ways in which we are supporting the response effort is the planning school and the architecture school and the Center for Social Research. We are supporting, we're building the protocol and pretty much all the arrangements to support the Red Cross by validating all the pop-up shelters in a systematic way so that they can be delivered more effectively and efficiently, and we don't have the situation that we had after Maria. So that's something else that we're trying to support. Their focus is really pop-up shelters and not the official shelters. So pretty much some of our professors have already been working, identifying camps and different settlements or neighborhoods, and we're putting together brigades of graduate students that will be going to the field to validate that data. So if you know of, there's a few other faculty from the University of Puerto Rico in the call. If you're interested, send me an email, and that's certainly a way that we can certainly support the delivery of aid.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Santos Cardona, could you, and we have about 13 minutes left. And so Santos Cardona, I know you put your name in the chat box. Do you have an update to share with the group?
Yes, can you hear me, right?
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. Hey, so my name is Santos. I'm a student from the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez. I'm a research assistant of Dr. Edwin Asensio, the director of the Social Science Department at UPRM. We have been working after Hurricane Maria in a Sea Grant research funded project studying vulnerable communities on the west coast of Puerto Rico. We have surveyed more than 600 people on the coast of the island. We have interviewed more than 60 people that suffered the impacts of Hurricane Maria. We have numerous phases studying vulnerability, individual resilience, community resilience, attitude. We have studied public security on the island, knowing that after Hurricane Maria struck the island, Puerto Rico did not have energy. So basically, these vulnerable communities were living at night 24 hours. So they were scared that people went to their communities and robbed them. So that was also a problem. And we also have a phase studying PTSD characteristics on people in these communities. At the moment, we're also working with the seismic network of Puerto Rico, La Red Sísmica de Puerto Rico. So we're gonna start working and studying how affected has the Tsunami Ready program has been educating people around the island, because we know that even though earthquakes has always been a problem in the island and the threat of a tsunami is present, people don't actually know how to react after them. And we want to know if the educational activities that the seismic network has been conducting are effective, and what needs to change for people to actually organize and be able to respond to such a big threat. So I basically want to share what we have been working on. I know there are people here that are working. Dr. Perez, I know she has been doing an awesome work on it. So basically, anyone that wants to collaborate, that wants to join and keep studying these problems, we're gonna be studying around the whole island, the tsunami ready part. But I just want to mention, and basically what our data sustain is that people are resilient individually, but we see a major problem that these communities in a organizational part, getting all the people in a community together is hard. After a hurricane passes like Maria, they actually work together. They are the first response group because we know the government is absent after a disaster. But let's say 3-4 months after the hurricane passes or a atmospheric event, everything comes back to normal and people don't actually get together. They discuss what's happening in their communities, how they can create plans to respond to such atmospheric events. And we see that there's a big problem educating, or basically how we are educating these people. We have given them brochures and we see that they're not such effective. So we need to study how can we get to the reality and the social perspective of people that are basically more than 50 years old in more than 8 communities that we have studied, that their basic income is basically the Social Security. They're retired, they're from a low income scale. So we need to know what's their social perspective and their context to be able to educate them, and they can respond to such a threat as an earthquake, a hurricane, a tsunami. So yeah, that's basically what we have been working on, and thank you for the opportunity. And this is needed for us to get together and not only connect in Puerto Rico, but the diaspora and people in the mainland that are, they have an attention of what's happening in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And Carlos, if you could share your email in the chat box, and we will make sure and get this information about your ongoing project in the notes. Thank you. And Sarah McBride, I see there are a couple of requests for you to explain the aftershock forecast. If you could please do that, and then we will turn with our remaining minutes to the SSEER researchers with ongoing projects in Puerto Rico. Sarah.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry to be back on the line. I'm really glad that people brought up the aftershock forecast, because I think it's a really important thing for us to discuss right now. So basically, the aftershock forecasts are based on models that the USGS has been running for a number of years. In fact, the first workable model we had was over 30 years ago in Riesenberg and Jones, and that's the generic model that was run early on. We've now switched to a more refined model over time. Now, it's important to understand that this aftershock sequence is more active than what we would expect to see for a magnitude 6.4 of similar size. So this is a active aftershock sequence. I'm just going to read some of the numbers, and all of our aftershock forecasts are available on the USGS website, and it's available through the front page of the website. We also have it translated in Spanish and in English. So these are the probabilities we have for the next week. So we have for the next week, for a magnitude 5, a 54% chance. What? A 5 or more, no, it's 5. So we have a 5%, we have 54% chance of a magnitude 5 in the next week. And we have an 8% chance of a magnitude 6 in a week. Okay, so that is, those are not necessarily small numbers to think about. This is an active sequence. And so basically we've broken these down further into 3 sequences of 3 scenarios of what can occur. The most probable thing that can occur right now, long term, is from the scenarios, is that we're going to see a decrease in activity over the next 30 days. That's a 79% chance, okay, in the next month, that there is going to be a decrease of activity, and we're not going to see anything bigger than a magnitude 5.9. Now, scenario 2, and this is an 18% chance over the next month that we're going to see something similar at what we call a doublet, similar to the 6.4, all right? And then there's a 3% chance that we're going to see a magnitude 7 or above in the next month. So we've broken it down to these 3 ways that this can happen in the next month. But we want to make people aware that we're not saying that it's over, because that's not something the USGS can do. We cannot predict earthquakes, and we cannot predict what this earthquake sequence is going to do. So I just want people to be mindful of the current situation when it comes to the seismicity. Now, people have said this is very localized, and right now it is, and absolutely. And the aftershocks are most likely to occur in the area that they're already occurring. We're not seeing too much migration, say, over to the Virgin Islands. That's not what we're seeing at all. We're seeing all of the earthquakes currently are where they were already happening in that southern area. So I'm sorry that was a little bit complex. I had a bunch of people come in and out of the room and make comments at me while I was talking, so it was a little bit distracting. And I'm sure I can explain it more simply next time. But that is just a little bit of information on the aftershock forecasts and how they work. This is the 3rd large earthquake sequence that we have released, the aftershock sequences. It's an automated system. So the aftershock forecasts release, they release in Anchorage and in Ridgecrest in California, and now here in Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much for that additional information. And just a reminder to everybody who is listening in on the call that this information is on the USGS website, as Sarah said, and thank you for providing that update. And I wanted to check in with everybody on the call, a couple of lessons learned. One, this is our first time for a virtual forum where we've used this platform. So thank you everyone for joining. Second, we're now at the time where we're getting very close to the end of the time. And I wanted to acknowledge that where we're at in our sort of roll call is hearing from the SSEER researchers who have ongoing projects in Puerto Rico. And I just, for those of you who are on the Zoom feature, I wanted to acknowledge that in our SSEER network, we have over 80 researchers who signed up for the SSEER network who have projects related to Hurricane Maria. And so I know some of those researchers are on the call right now. I know we're approaching the end of our call time, but I wanted to acknowledge how many ongoing projects there are from this network. And with our time remaining, I wanted to see if you are an SSEER researcher who has an ongoing project in Puerto Rico. I know a couple of people reached out to me in advance, so we're going to hear a brief update from Maria Dillard at NIST and then Leah Haverhals from CU Denver. But if you're an SSEER researcher with one of these ongoing projects, if you want to pop your name in the chat box, and then we will wrap this up close to time. I know we're going to go a little over time with this so we can hear from our SSEER members. So Maria Dillard, if you're on the line, could you give us a brief update on the NIST project in Puerto Rico? Thank you. Maria Dillard, are you still on the line? She may not be on here. Okay, is Leah Haverhals from CU Denver on the line?
Hi, yes, can you guys hear me okay? This is Leah.
Oh, hi, Leah, yes. So would you like to share just the thrust of your project and if you have any requests or updates for the network? Thank you.
Sure, I was down in Puerto Rico for a few months early 2019, and I did 64 interviews with folks that live in home-based long-term care settings, both within the Department of Veterans Affairs programs and also small non-VA settings, so lots of mini nursing homes. And so I was really interested in some of the folks' comments about how the different elderly populations are struggling and how they're faring with the earthquakes. And also the individual that was talking about doing that work in Mayaguez, talking to lots of different folks that are in vulnerable situations, both in the interviews and in doing those surveys. So I'm almost ready to defend my dissertation later this semester, so in March, and then I'll have more to disseminate to you all, but I'm hoping to be able to collaborate with some of you too. So I will keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah, and we will make sure and put up the full list of SSEER researchers with ongoing projects in Puerto Rico related to the hurricanes, to landslides, and so forth. So thank you for that update. And I see via the chat, I think Joe Johnson and Maria Dillard from NIST are on the line. Have either of you been unmuted where we can hear from you now? Or Camilla? Were you able to unmute them, Katie?
She doesn't have audio, I can't unmute her.
Okay, Joe Johnson from NIST, Camilla Young from NIST, and Maria Dillard from NIST. There are several major ongoing projects from the National Institute for Standards and Technology, and it seems like we may be having some problem with the audio or unmuting on their part, but is anybody from NIST able to get your audio working? Sure. Okay, so Joe Johnson said she will provide a written update on the various projects that the National Institute for Standards and Technology are leading in Puerto Rico. Are there any other SSEER researchers out there with ongoing projects in Puerto Rico that you wanted to share with the broader network? Bruno, I think Bruno may have had to log off. Is Bruno still on the line?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, Bruno, hi. Did you have an update you wanted to share?
Sure, and I'm here with my colleague Manuel Chavez. So we're in the faculty at Michigan State, the School of Journalism at Michigan State. Just very briefly, a couple of folks already mentioned the role of journalists and news media. So that's exactly the project they're working on related to Hurricane Maria. We had one of our former PhD students travel to Puerto Rico in December of 2017 to collect some data. She's a faculty member now at the Universidad Interamericana. We were there in February of last year, and we're planning to visit the island sometime later this year. And although our focus is on hurricane coverage, the issue of the potential of an earthquake was mentioned by several interviewees, media folks, during our field work in February of last year. So we're pretty sure that the theme is going to come back when we re-interview some of the same folks. So our plan is to collect this data, and based on that data and the data that we collected last year is to come up with a series of working papers and recommendations that we'll use in workshops that we have planned with journalists, editors, and other news people in Puerto Rico. The deal with not only media practices, but I think that's something that was mentioned by a few people already with PTSD, that it's something that did come up in the interviews, but was not discussed within the media organization, was not dealt with appropriately. So that's all, I think.
Okay, and Bruno, thank you for sharing that information in the chat box, which we will make sure and get up, and thank you for that update. And I understand Maria Dillard from NIST is trying to call in from another phone. Maria, can you try to touch base with us? Oh, I'm sorry to our colleagues at NIST. I'm not sure what's happening with the line, but thank you for the offer to send a written update that we can post, because I know you have several crucial projects that you are leading forward there in Puerto Rico. And I want to be attentive to the time. I know we are just past our time, everyone. And so thank you for listening, for being here. Thank you for the work that from our colleagues in Puerto Rico, colleagues on the mainland. So a couple of things, you've been using the chat box today very effectively. Thank you for sharing resources through there. If you have feedback for us as we continue with these virtual forums for how we can most effectively organize and get this crucial information from the members of the Social Science Network, we would very much welcome that. If you have resources or information that you would like to share with us to have us post on the SSEER page for the Puerto Rico earthquakes, please either send that to me at my email address, or you can use the sseer@colorado.edu address. If there are things that you want Katie, who I want to acknowledge and thank for all of her effort with taking the notes. If you have resources you want to share or things you would like us to post, and also critically, if you are interested in joining an SSEER field team, especially one that may be focused on supporting efforts of our colleagues in Puerto Rico with collecting perishable data, or with collecting baseline data that may be shared with the broader SSEER network, please do reach out to me directly or use the sseer@colorado.edu web address. Also, please note that you please sign up for resources and updates at our converge.colorado.edu/signup page so we can make sure and stay in touch. Much of the information we were able to gather today came from all of you. So please do check out the SSEER researchers map. You can search for various things like researchers by discipline, researchers by disasters that they have studied. That's how we generated the researcher map showing those studying Maria. So please do use that as a resource that is about all of you and the expertise that you bring to the table. And then please note that we will post the recording of this, notes, information about researchers with ongoing projects in Puerto Rico at the virtual forum page for the earthquakes. And then last, just wanted to note that thanks to our partners at the NSF-funded Design Safe facility at the University of Texas, Austin, we do have a dedicated SSEER Slack channel over there, and we have instructions up on the Converge website for how you can join that Slack channel. And so please do pop over there if you have further information that you would like to share with the network. And I want to again thank everyone for being on here, acknowledge the time. And I understand people may have already logged off because we were at the end of our time. But also before we close, if anyone has anything to put in the chat box to get in the records, please do go ahead and do that. And again, comments, questions, resources are welcome. And thank you everyone so much for joining this virtual forum today. And we will be back in touch via the SSEER email list with next steps for the network. And thank you again, everyone, very, very much for your time today.